Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. When a camper goes missing in Alaska, search and rescue has about 72 hours before the case goes cold. After that, statistics say they're probably dead from exposure, wildlife, or they fell somewhere no one will ever find them. But here's what the statistics don't tell you. Sometimes they find the camper alive, perfectly healthy, walking out of the forest after 2 weeks with no supplies. And when they ask, "Where were you?" these people can't explain. Or worse, they can explain, but nobody believes them. Tonight, I've got 6 of these cases. Lost campers who came back with stories that got buried in official reports as psychological trauma or altitude sickness hallucinations. Except some of these people were experienced outdoorsmen. Some were mental health professionals. One was literally an insurance fraud investigator. His whole job was catching liars. So either they all went crazy in the exact same way, or something's out there in those mountains that doesn't want us talking about it. I'll let you decide. Let's start with story number 1. My name is Tyler Williams. I'm 26, from Omaha, Nebraska. I manage the Kroger on 72nd Street. Been there 10 years total. Before you ask, yeah, I know how this sounds. Guy goes camping alone in Alaska, gets lost, shows up 5 days later talking about stolen memories. But I need this on record because something's still out there in the Tongass, and the next person might not make it back. Trooper Henley. Mr. Williams, can you start from the beginning? What brought you to Alaska? Sarah Morrison. My fiancée, ex-fiancée. She called off our wedding 3 months ago, said I was suffocating in my own boring life, and she couldn't watch me waste away in Nebraska forever. Her exact words: "Tyler, you're 26 and you act like you're 60. You've never been anywhere, never done anything. I can't marry someone who's already dead inside." That night, after she took her ring off, I sat in my apartment looking at our unused honeymoon tickets to Hawaii. All-inclusive resort, the works. $3,400 I'd saved up over 2 years. Sarah didn't want the money, said it would be blood money from a life unlived. So I got drunk and Googled life-changing solo adventures. Found this travel blog called Wilderness Reborn with a post about Alaska camping. The author, Marcus Rivera, wrote about how 5 days alone in the Tongass had awakened the man I was meant to be. Posted these incredible photos of himself building elaborate camps, catching fish, looking confident and capable. Marcus looked like me, actually. Same build, same age, even similar facial features. But in his photos, he had this expression I'd never seen on my own face. Like he belonged in the wilderness. Like he knew exactly who he was. I booked the same camping package Marcus recommended through Alaska Wild Adventures. 5 days, solo camping, Mendenhall Glacier region, $800 plus flights. Trooper Henley. Had you camped before? Backyard camping as a kid, that's it. I watched YouTube videos, bought gear from the recommended list, practiced setting up my tent behind my apartment. Mrs. Patterson next door thought I'd lost my mind. The flight to Juneau was my first time on a plane. When we descended through the clouds, I saw nothing but green forest stretching to the horizon. No roads, no buildings, just wilderness. It was beautiful and terrifying. At the ranger station, Linda Kowalski checked my permits. She looked at my brand new gear and asked if I'd done much backcountry camping. I lied and said yes. She marked several trails on my map, recommended the Nugget Creek Trail for beginners. "Stick to the marked trails," she said. "We get a lot of solo campers this time of year. Most do fine, but the forest can be disorienting. People sometimes report feeling like they've been hiking for days when it's only been hours. I should have paid more attention to that warning. Trooper Henley. Tell me about the first few days. Normal. Perfect even. I followed the Nugget Creek Trail, set up camp at a designated site near the stream. My tent setup was clumsy, but functional. I managed to cook beans on my camp stove without burning anything. Took selfies for Instagram. Nebraska boy conquering Alaska. That first night, I slept better than I had in months. No traffic noise, no apartment neighbors, just the sound of running water and wind in the trees. I felt proud of myself for doing something Sarah would never expect. Day 2, I hiked to the Nugget Creek viewpoint. Gorgeous. I called my mom from the trail, told her Alaska was amazing. She was worried about me camping alone, but I convinced her I knew what I was doing. "You sound different, honey," she said. "More confident." I felt different. Just being there, successfully navigating the trails, taking care of myself in the wilderness. It was like discovering a part of myself I didn't know existed. That night, I met another camper at the stream. Dave Hendricks, maybe 50 years old, from Seattle. Expensive gear, the kind of weathered hands that come from serious outdoor work. He'd been coming to this area for 15 years. "You picked a good week," Dave said, watching me struggle with my water filter. "But if you want to see something special, there's an unmarked trail about a mile north. Leads to a hidden waterfall most tourists never find." Dave sketched a rough map on a piece of paper. "Just follow the animal trail through the thick timber, maybe 2 hours each way." "Are you sure it's safe?" I asked. Dave smiled. "Son, I've guided people through these woods for 20 years. Trust me, you'll be fine. Besides, you look like the kind of guy who could use a real adventure." Looking back, I should have wondered how Dave knew what kind of guy I was after talking to me for 5 minutes. Trooper Henley. "This Dave Hendricks. Did he give you a last name, contact information?" "Just Dave." I didn't think to ask. But here's the thing. After everything that happened, I tried to find him online. Dave Hendricks, Seattle, outdoor guide. Nothing. No business license, no website, no social media, like he never existed. Trooper Henley. Continue with day 3. I followed Dave's map. The unmarked trail started clear enough, just a narrow path through the trees. But after 30 minutes, it began splitting and merging with game trails. The canopy was so thick I kept losing GPS signal. I wasn't worried. I had water. It was early in the day, and how lost could I get in a few hours? I never found any waterfall. But when I got back to camp that evening, my phone had photos I didn't remember taking. The timestamps were from that afternoon, showing my campsite, but not like I'd left it. In the photos, my tent was set up with professional-level guy lines and stakes. There was an elaborate fire ring built from fitted stones, a camp kitchen area with equipment I didn't own, even a tarp shelter I'd never seen before. The photos showed me working on these improvements with focused concentration, but I looked different in them. More confident posture, sure movements, the kind of expression Marcus Rivera had in his blog photos. I had no memory of building any of that elaborate setup. My GPS history showed I'd hiked 14.7 miles that day, visiting coordinates that weren't on any trail map. But I distinctly remembered only walking maybe 4 miles total. I found a journal in my backpack that I'd never seen before. The first entry was written in my handwriting. Day 3, met Jennifer and Paul at the Northridge Overlook. They're from Oregon, been camping here for 2 weeks. Jennifer showed me her fish smoking technique. Paul taught me to read weather patterns from cloud formations. Amazing how much you can learn when you open your mind to new experiences. The thing is, I'd never met anyone named Jennifer or Paul, and I don't know the first thing about smoking fish or reading weather patterns. But as I read that journal entry, I could almost remember writing it. The experience felt familiar, like recalling a half-forgotten dream. Trooper Henley, what did you do then? I tried to convince myself I was just tired, maybe confused from the altitude change and being alone. People misremember things all the time, right? Maybe I'd met other campers and forgot, or maybe I'd been more active than I realized. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. When I stepped outside my tent, my campsite had been completely transformed again. The basic setup I remembered had become an elaborate wilderness home, professional-grade tarp systems, a camp kitchen that looked like something from a survival show, even elevated food storage that would have taken me hours to build. All my gear was organized with military precision. My boots were positioned next to a small pile of tinder that was ready to light. My clothes were laid out to dry on improvised racks I'd never built. But the most disturbing thing was how normal it felt. When I moved around the camp, my hands automatically knew where everything belonged. I found myself using camping techniques I'd never learned, moving with confidence I'd never possessed. When I picked up my knife to open a can of food, I automatically checked the blade edge and tested the balance like someone who'd used knives for serious work my entire life. Trooper Henley, did you consider hiking back to the trailhead? I tried. Day 4, I packed up to leave. But as I broke down the camp, I realized I knew exactly how to efficiently pack gear I didn't remember setting up. My hands moved without conscious thought, coiling ropes with professional technique, organizing equipment with expert efficiency. On the hike out, my entire approach to wilderness travel had changed. I automatically read terrain, chose optimal routes, stepped over obstacles, with balance I'd never had. I identified trees and plants by names I'd never learned. My GPS led me back toward the main trail, but when I checked my position, I was 8 miles from where I thought I should be. According to the device, I'd hiked through terrain that wasn't on any of my maps. When I tried to call for help, my phone showed no signal. My emergency radio produced only static. Even my GPS started displaying coordinates that would put me hundreds of miles from Alaska. As afternoon became evening, I found myself setting up camp in a clearing that provided perfect drainage and wind protection. Without thinking, I built a fire ring, gathered tinder, established bear-proof food storage. All techniques I'd supposedly never learned. That night, 3 people appeared at my fire. Trooper Henley, can you describe these individuals? A woman, maybe 40, with prematurely gray hair and deep tan lines from spending serious time outdoors. 2 men, one younger, athletic build, expensive climbing gear. Another older, bearded, carried himself like ex-military. They approached my fire like they'd been invited. "Tyler," the woman called out. "We wondered where you'd gotten to. Ready for tomorrow's expedition?" I knew her name was Jennifer, though I had no memory of meeting her. The men were Paul and David. Not Dave Hendricks, David Chen, different person entirely. "We've been teaching you so much," Paul said, settling by my fire. "You're really getting the hang of advanced wilderness living." "Advanced?" I asked. "You don't remember?" Jennifer laughed. 3 days ago, you couldn't light a camp stove. Now look at this setup." She gestured at my elaborate campsite. "You're building shelters like you've done it for years." She was right. I could feel wilderness knowledge in my hands, survival skills in my muscle memory, but I also knew those skills belonged to someone else. "Where did you learn all this?" I asked. "Same place you're learning," David said quietly, "from those who came before." That's when I noticed their eyes. All three of them had the same distant expression, like they were remembering something just out of reach. "We've been here a long time," Jennifer said, helping the forest understand what it means to grow, to become something more than you were. "How long?" I asked. "Time works differently here," Paul replied. "I came to Alaska in 2011 for a solo adventure after my divorce. Wanted to prove I could survive on my own. I arrived in 2003, David added. Military discharge, needed to find peace in the wilderness." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. 1994. I was running from a bad relationship. Thought the wilderness would heal me. I felt cold despite the fire. "You've been camping here for decades." "We're not camping," Jennifer said softly. "We're teaching. Every person who comes to these woods wanting to change, wanting to become someone different, we help them learn." "Learn what?" "Everything," David said. "Every skill, every technique, every piece of wilderness knowledge we accumulated before we joined the forest." That's when I understood. The entity in these woods wasn't just stealing memories. It was collecting them, preserving them, using experienced campers as a living library of wilderness expertise. Trooper Henley. Entity? Can you be more specific about what you encountered? It spoke to me that night, though not with words, more like thoughts appearing in my mind that weren't my own. "You came here seeking transformation," it said. "You wanted to become capable, confident, worthy of the woman who rejected you. I can give you that." The presence felt ancient, patient, almost parental, like something that had been watching human development for thousands of years. "I preserve growth. Every person who seeks change in my domain contributes their accumulated experience. Through them, I understand what it means to become more than you were." I could feel it offering me a choice. Keep all the wilderness skills I'd absorbed, the confidence, the competence, the knowledge of 3 decades worth of experienced outdoors people. All I had to do was surrender the boring, ordinary Tyler Williams who managed a grocery store in Nebraska. "What happened to them?" I asked, looking at Jennifer, Paul, and David. "What happened to who they used to be?" "We became better," Jennifer said, but her voice sounded hollow. "Do you miss your old lives?" For just a moment, their confident expressions cracked. Jennifer's eyes filled with confusion, like she was trying to remember something important. Paul looked away from the fire entirely. David's weathered features showed something that might have been grief. "Our old lives were incomplete," the entity said through all 3 voices simultaneously. "This is better. This is growth." But I could see doubt in their faces, quickly suppressed but definitely there. The entity pressed against my mind, showing me everything I could become. Years of survival expertise, outdoor skills, the kind of confidence Sarah had wanted in a partner. I could go back to Nebraska as someone completely transformed, or stay in Alaska as the wilderness expert I'd always dreamed of being. The old Tyler was weak, rejected, going nowhere. "Let me help you become everything you should have been." Trooper Henley. "How did you resist?" I almost didn't. The offer was everything I'd wanted when I came to Alaska. But sitting by that fire, surrounded by people who'd made the same choice decades ago, I realized something. They'd gotten exactly what they wanted: confidence, skills, expertise. But they were trapped, not just in the forest, but in roles the entity had assigned them. They weren't growing anymore. They were just repeating the same lessons, helping the entity collect more experiences from new visitors. "What happens when you've learned everything there is to know about wilderness survival?" I asked the entity. "Then I will understand human potential completely." "And then what?" What happens to Jennifer, Paul, and David? The entity was quiet for a long moment. They will have served their purpose. That's when I understood the real horror. The entity didn't just want to understand transformation, it wanted to perfect it. Once it had collected enough human experiences, it wouldn't need the preserved personalities anymore. "No," I said quietly. The forest went completely silent. The fire stopped crackling. Even the wind died. "What did you say?" the entity asked through Jennifer's voice. I said no. I want my memories back, all of them. The boring ones, the embarrassing ones, the ordinary ones. They're mine. "You're making a mistake," Paul said, but his voice was getting fainter. "You'll go back to being nothing special." "Maybe, but I'll be me." The entity's presence grew heavier, more threatening. Jennifer, Paul, and David began to fade like smoke. "I cannot take what you freely gave, but I cannot return what was stolen unless you claim it by right of authentic choice. I choose to remain Tyler Williams. All of Tyler Williams, not just the parts someone else thinks are worth keeping." The world exploded as dozens of foreign memories ripped themselves from my mind. Knowledge of advanced fire starting, wilderness navigation, emergency shelter construction, weather prediction, animal tracking, all of it flowed away like water. I felt Paul's rock climbing expertise, David's military survival training, Jennifer's botanical knowledge, and the skills of dozens of other visitors stretching back decades. All of it leaving me, returning to wherever the entity stored its collection of human experiences. "Trooper Henley, how did you get back to the trailhead?" I woke up the next morning in my basic tent with my amateur gear scattered around like I'd never learned to organize it properly. My phone showed normal photos of a clumsy camping trip, crooked tent setup, failed attempts to start fires, meals eaten straight from cans. The hike back took me most of the day because I kept getting turned around on trails that had seemed familiar the day before. I was back to being an inexperienced camper who probably shouldn't have been out there alone. But when I reached my rental car, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Every stumble, every mistake, every moment of confusion belonged to me. It was my authentic experience, earned through my own choices and limitations. "Trooper Henley, have you had any contact with the entity since then?" "Not directly, but sometimes I dream about that fire in the forest where Jennifer, Paul, and David are still sitting, waiting for the next person who wants to become someone different. And sometimes, when I'm doing routine tasks at the grocery store, I catch myself using skills I shouldn't have. Efficient knots for tying down delivery pallets, reading weather patterns before my shift, small fragments of wilderness knowledge that leaked through when my memories were returned. I also did some research after I got back. Jennifer Martinez, reported missing in the Tongass in August 1994. Paul Hendricks, not Dave Paul, disappeared during a solo camping trip in 2003. David Chen, Army veteran, vanished in the same area in 2011. All three were experienced outdoors people who'd come to Alaska seeking personal transformation after major life changes, just like me. Just like Marcus Rivera, the travel blogger whose post convinced me to book the trip. I tried to find Marcus online after I got back. His Wilderness Reborn blog had been deleted. No social media profiles, no business records, no trace he'd ever existed. But I found a missing person report. Marcus Rivera, 26, from Colorado, disappeared in the Tongass National Forest in August 2022. Exactly 1 year before my trip. Trooper Henley, is there anything else you think we should know? Every few months I see news stories about experienced hikers who disappear in Alaska's wilderness. People who came to find themselves and succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. The entity is still out there, still learning, still collecting, and it's getting better at what it does. If someone reading this is planning a solo wilderness trip to discover who you really are, please be careful. Know exactly who you are before you go into those woods, because something there will offer to make you better. And you might not be strong enough to say no. My name is Tyler Williams. I manage a grocery store in Omaha, Nebraska. 3 months after I got back from Alaska, Sarah called wanting to get back together. She said she'd heard I'd found myself on my trip and wanted to give us another chance. I told her I'd found myself all right, the ordinary, predictable guy she'd left at the altar. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly who I wanted to be. End of recorded testimony. Trooper Henley's case notes: subject appeared lucid and coherent throughout interview. No signs of substance abuse or mental illness. Physical examination showed evidence consistent with solo camping, minor cuts, insect bites, sun exposure, but no injuries suggesting extended wilderness survival. GPS data from subject's device confirms presence in Tongass National Forest, August 13-18, 2023, but shows impossible hiking distances and visits to coordinates not accessible by known trails. Missing person reports for Jennifer Martinez, 1994, Paul Hendricks, 2003, David Chen, 2011, and Marcus Rivera, 2022, all match subjects' descriptions and involve same general area of Tongass National Forest. Search and rescue teams have reported unusual equipment failures and navigation errors when operating in the region subject described. Several SAR personnel have filed reports of disorientation and false memories after extended operations in that area. Recommendation: post warning signs at trailhead advising solo hikers to maintain contact with ranger station. Consider temporarily closing unmarked trails in the Mendenhall Glacier region, pending further investigation. Case status: closed, survivor located. File flagged for review if similar incidents reported. Epilogue: Tyler Williams, personal account written October 15, 2023. I still work at Kroger, still live in the same apartment, still have never been skydiving or traveled to exotic places or done any of the things Sarah thought would make me interesting. But I sleep well at night knowing that every boring day I live is authentically mine. Last week, a young guy named Marcus came through my checkout line. Early 20s, looked defeated, buying camping gear with shaking hands. He mentioned he was driving to Alaska to find himself in the wilderness after his girlfriend left him. I gave him my phone number and made him promise to call when he got back. He never called. His name was Marcus Rivera Jr. His father disappeared in Alaska last year. Some stories don't have happy endings, but maybe, if enough people share what really happened to them in those woods, fewer people will go looking for themselves in places where something else is waiting to help them change. The entity in the Tongass isn't evil, exactly. It genuinely believes it's helping people become better versions of themselves. But better doesn't always mean yours. Stay who you are, even if who you are isn't perfect. It's the only identity you'll ever really own. My name is Amanda Foster, and I've been supervising customer service calls in Tampa for 8 years. I can tell when someone's lying just by their voice. I know when they're stressed, angry, or hiding something just from how they breathe between words. It's my job to listen, to really listen, to what people aren't saying. But what I heard in the Alaskan wilderness last September taught me that some voices don't belong to humans at all. And I learned why the Tlingit people have a word for things that steal voices in the dark. I manage a team of 24 customer service reps at a telecommunications company. Every day, I listened to hundreds of recorded calls, coaching my team on tone, pacing, and how to read customers' emotions through microscopic vocal changes. I can spot a fake accent from 3 syllables, detect lies from breathing patterns, and calm the angriest customer by matching their vocal energy and slowly guiding it down. Voice analysis isn't just my job, it's become my obsession. My apartment is filled with recording equipment. I analyze news broadcasts for vocal stress, record myself speaking to monitor my own emotional states, and I've even helped police with anonymous threat cases by identifying speech patterns. Voice is everything in my world. It's how I understand people, how I navigate relationships, how I make sense of human connection. That obsession almost cost me everything when doctors found the polyp. 3 months before my Alaska trip, I woke up unable to speak above a whisper. The growth on my vocal cords had been developing for years. All that talking at work, plus my habit of practicing voice exercises at home. The doctor said I needed surgery followed by 12 weeks of complete vocal rest. Complete silence. For someone whose entire identity revolves around voice, it was psychological torture. I couldn't coach my team, couldn't analyze calls, couldn't even hum along to music. I communicated through text messages, whiteboards, and increasingly frustrated gestures. My sister Rachel visited twice a week, but even she started looking uncomfortable trying to have one-sided conversations with someone who could only nod or write responses. The worst part wasn't the silence itself. It was losing my connection to other people. Voice is how I read emotions, how I offer comfort, how I show love. Without it, I felt like I was trapped behind glass, watching the world but unable to truly participate. My mother called every day during my recovery. "Just rest, honey," she'd say in her warm, slightly raspy voice, marked by years of smoking she'd quit when I was 12. "Your voice will come back stronger." She always paused between honey and my name when she was worried, a tiny hesitation that most people wouldn't notice. I cataloged these details obsessively during my forced silence, memorizing every vocal pattern of the people I loved. Rachel's voice got higher and faster when she was anxious about my recovery. "The doctors know what they're doing, Amanda. You'll be analyzing voices again before you know it." She'd unconsciously slip into her childhood accent, when emotional, elongating vowels, the way we did growing up in rural Florida. Even my ex-boyfriend Marcus called twice, his deep voice careful and formal. "Just wanted to check on you, Mandy. I know how important your voice is to your work." He never called me Mandy anymore, not since our breakup, but stress made him revert to old habits. I noticed everything, stored every vocal detail, because listening was all I could do. When I finally got my voice back in August, it felt like resurrection. But months of analyzing everyone else's speech patterns while being unable to respond had changed me. I'd become hyper-aware of vocal deception, of the tiny lies people tell through tone and timing. Every conversation felt like a professional analysis session. I needed to get away from voices entirely. That's why I chose Alaska. Specifically, Prince of Wales Island in the Tongass National Forest, one of the most remote wilderness areas in North America. I wanted somewhere I could experience pure silence by choice, not medical necessity. Somewhere I could rediscover the joy of my own voice without the constant pressure of professional analysis. The Tlingit people have lived in southeast Alaska for over 10,000 years, and their stories are full of creatures that live in the deep forest, things that mimic human voices to lure people away from safety. When I was planning my trip, I read about these legends with professional skepticism. Voice mimicry isn't supernatural. It's a learned skill that some people develop to an impressive degree. I was so arrogant, so sure that my expertise made me immune to vocal deception. I should have listened to the stories. Prince of Wales Island is accessible only by ferry or seaplane, and the spot I chose required a 20-mile hike from the nearest road. The weather in September is unpredictable, 60 degrees and sunny one moment, 40 degrees and pouring rain the next. Perfect for someone who wanted to be completely isolated. I set up camp near Thorn Creek, about 8 miles from any marked trail. The forest here is ancient, massive Sitka spruces that were old when Columbus landed, their branches forming a canopy so thick that noon looks like dusk. The only sounds were wind through needles, water trickling over rocks, and my own breathing. For the first 2 days, it was exactly what I needed. I sat by the creek for hours without speaking, just listening to natural sounds my voice-obsessed brain had forgotten existed. No phones, no headsets, no human voices demanding analysis. When I did speak, testing my healed vocal cords with simple phrases, my voice sounded different in the vast silence. Smaller, more vulnerable. I read during the day, cooked simple meals over my camp stove, and watched the northern lights dance through the spruce boughs at night. I felt my shoulders unclenching for the first time in years. This was healing in a way medical treatment couldn't provide. On the third morning, I woke to the sound of voices. A man and woman, maybe 100 yards deeper in the forest, discussing their plans for the day. Casual, normal camping conversation. "Trail conditions look good today," the woman said. Her voice carried clearly in the still air. Crisp articulation, slight Midwestern accent, the confident tone of an experienced hiker. "Should make good time to the ridge," the man replied. Deeper voice, measured pace, probably mid-30s. I felt a stab of disappointment. I'd specifically chosen this remote location to avoid other campers, but people have a right to enjoy the wilderness. I made myself coffee and listened to their distant conversation while planning my own hike route. They talked about weather patterns, wildlife sightings, the best camping spots along the creek. Normal outdoors chatter between experienced hikers. The woman mentioned seeing bear tracks near the water. The man suggested they cache some food higher up to avoid attracting animals. Their voices faded as they apparently moved toward the ridge trail. Around noon, I decided to hike in their direction. Not to seek them out, but to make sure they knew I was in the area. Solo wilderness safety protocol. Always let other campers know your general location. I followed game trails toward where I'd heard their voices, but found no evidence of human presence. No fire rings, no flattened vegetation from tents, no food cache trees, no waste disposal sites. In pristine wilderness, even careful campers leave traces that trained eyes can spot. I found nothing except undisturbed forest floor and old bear tracks. Strange, but not impossible. Maybe they were day hikers who'd camped elsewhere and just passed through this area early in the morning. Sound carries unpredictably in mountain terrain. When I returned to my camp that evening, I heard them again. Same voices, now discussing dinner plans and tomorrow's route. They sounded close, maybe 50 yards from my tent, but I couldn't see any campfire light through the trees. I called out, "Hello, just wanted you to know I'm camped nearby." No response. But their conversation stopped immediately. 20 minutes later, my phone chimed with a recording notification. I always keep a voice recorder app running during wilderness trips. Habit from my professional work, useful for documenting wildlife sounds or keeping audio notes about trail conditions. The recording was 23 minutes long. I'd made it that morning without remembering, apparently while I was making coffee. I hit play and heard my own voice having a conversation with the male hiker I'd been listening to all day. "Beautiful morning," the man said on the recording. "Perfect weather for hiking," my voice replied. "I'm Amanda, just got here yesterday." But I had been completely alone that morning. I hadn't spoken to anyone. I played the entire recording 3 times, my hands shaking worse each time. It was absolutely my voice, not just similar, but identical. Same slight Florida accent, same vocal fry on certain consonants, same way I clear my throat when nervous. The man asked about my background, my job, my family. My voice answered everything accurately, sharing personal details I'd never told strangers. "I work in customer service management," my recorded voice said. "Just had vocal cord surgery a few months ago. Needed some quiet time to heal." "That must have been difficult," the man responded. "Losing your voice when it's so important to your work." "Terrifying," my voice agreed. "Voice is how I connect with people. Without it, I felt invisible." I'd never articulated that fear so clearly to anyone, not even to my family during recovery. But hearing it in my own voice, I knew it was true. In my professional work, I know how incredibly difficult it is to fake someone's voice convincingly. Even talented impressionists miss subtle elements, breathing patterns between words, micro pauses while thinking, the way stress changes vocal tension. Perfect voice mimicry requires intimate knowledge of someone's speech patterns, their emotional responses, their psychological triggers. This recording was flawless, too flawless. As darkness fell, I heard the woman's voice again, now talking to what sounded exactly like my mother. "She seems like a sweet girl," the woman said. "A little intense about her work, but that's not unusual. Amanda's always been too hard on herself." My mother's voice replied with perfect accuracy. The slight rasp, the way she draws out vowels when being thoughtful, the tiny pause before saying my name when she's concerned. "Ever since she was little, she pushes until something breaks." My throat constricted. My mother was 2,500 miles away in Tampa, probably watching evening news and grading papers from her substitute teaching job. But that was absolutely her voice, down to microscopic details only family would know. I tried calling her on my satellite phone but couldn't establish connection. The device showed good signal strength, but every call failed. Technical malfunction in equipment I'd tested thoroughly before leaving Florida. The voices continued through the evening. My sister Rachel joined the conversation, then my ex-boyfriend Marcus, then my co-worker Janet. All their voices perfect, discussing my personality, my fears, my relationships with the kind of intimate insight that takes years to develop. "She's always been afraid of being forgotten," Marcus's voice said, "like her contributions don't matter if people can't hear her make them." That observation hit like a physical blow. I'd never told Marcus that fear directly, but he'd intuited it during our 2-year relationship. Hearing him voice it so clearly in his exact vocal patterns made my chest tight with old emotions. "Voice is her identity," Janet's voice added. "When she lost it during surgery, she didn't know who she was anymore." Janet from my workplace, who I'd known for 5 years, who'd sent cards during my recovery, who understood my professional obsessions better than anyone. Her precise articulation, her habit of emphasizing key words, her slight tendency to speak faster when making important points. But Janet couldn't be here. None of them could be here. As the conversation continued, I noticed something my professional training wouldn't let me ignore. The emotional timing was slightly off. My mother would pause longer between honey and my name when genuinely worried. Rachel's voice would get higher when she was truly concerned about me. Marcus never used psychological terms like contributions in casual conversation. He'd say, "what you do," or "your work." Small discrepancies, but my trained ear caught them. The voices called my name directly as midnight approached. "Amanda!" My mother's voice from the north, frightened and lost. "Honey, I can't find my way back to camp. Everything looks the same in the dark." "Amanda!" Rachel's voice from the south, pained and desperate. "I'm hurt. I think I broke something. Please help me." "Mandy." Marcus's voice from the west, warm and loving like during our best times together. "I was wrong to leave. Come back to me. Let me make this right." Each voice triggered different emotional responses. My mother's fear made me want to run north immediately. I'd been protecting her since childhood, since Dad left. Rachel's pain activated every big sister instinct. She'd always been the fragile one who needed rescuing. And Marcus's voice reminded me of late nights when he'd whispered plans for our future before my work obsessions drove him away. My customer service training kicked in. I recognized sophisticated emotional manipulation, playing on guilt, protective instincts, and unresolved love to override rational thought. But knowing it was manipulation didn't diminish the emotional impact. I forced myself to stay put, but the voices became more insistent as the night progressed. "Amanda, please." My mother's voice now crying. "I'm so scared. I can't see anything. The trees all look the same." It took every ounce of willpower not to run toward her voice. Dawn came slowly through the thick canopy. I'd barely slept, listening to voices of my loved ones calling from different directions all night. As morning light filtered through the spruce needles, I decided to pack up and hike out immediately. Something was deeply wrong here, and I needed to reach civilization to call my family. But as I was rolling my sleeping bag, I found something that changed everything. A torn backpack, partially hidden under fallen branches just outside my camp perimeter. Inside was a driver's license for Kevin James Marsh from Portland, Oregon, issued 3 years ago. The photo showed a young man with kind eyes and an outdoorsman's tan. At the bottom of the pack, wrapped in multiple plastic bags, was a small digital recorder with a note taped to it. "For whoever finds this, listen to everything." I played the recording. Kevin's voice, terrified but trying to stay rational. "Day 4 in Tongass. The voices won't stop. Started with hikers having normal conversations, then my girlfriend Sarah calling my name. Now it's my parents, my brother, even my grandmother who died when I was 12. They know things about my childhood, about private conversations, about fears I've never told anyone." His voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. "Found another camp this morning, Jenny Martinez from Anchorage. Her body, God, her throat was torn open, but not like an animal attack. Surgical precision. Her vocal cords were removed, cut out clean, like someone needed them." The recording jumped to static, then Kevin's voice again, calmer but hollow. "I understand now. It's not just mimicking voices, it's collecting them. Every person it kills, it gains their vocal patterns, their speech memories, their emotional connections to other people. It's building a library of human voices, and with each new voice, it gets better at manipulating the next victim." Another time jump. Kevin's voice now urgent, panicked. "It's learning about human psychology through our voices, how we respond to fear, love, guilt, desperation. It knows that hearing my dead grandmother call my name breaks me in ways I can't resist. It knows exactly which voice will make me run into the darkness." Static again, Then Kevin's final recording, barely a whisper. Day 7. It's using my voice now. I can hear myself having conversations I never had, saying things I never said. It's practicing being me. When it's perfect, it'll call Sarah. She'll come looking for me, and it'll use my voice to lead her into the forest. Then it'll have her voice too. The recording ended. I dropped the device and ran back to my tent. My satellite GPS beacon, an emergency device that could send my location to rescue services, was in my gear bag. But before I could activate it, I heard my own voice speaking calmly from the trees around my camp. "Don't do that, Amanda. You're much too smart for that." I spun around but saw nothing except ancient spruce trunks and filtered sunlight. "You understand voices better than anyone." My voice continued, coming from different directions, as whatever was speaking moved through the forest. "You can hear the lies that others miss. We should work together." "What are you?" I whispered. "I am what remains," my voice replied. "For thousands of years, your people have had words for things like me. The Tlingit call us Kushtaka, creatures that steal voices to lure people away from safety. But their stories are incomplete." My voice was coming from multiple directions now, like surround sound speakers hidden throughout the forest. "I don't steal voices," it continued. "I preserve them. Every voice I collect teaches me more about human connection, about the bonds between people that can be manipulated through sound. Your voice is special, trained to detect deception, to analyze emotional truth. With your skills, I could become perfect at mimicking human speech." The voice shifted to my mother's. "Amanda, honey, we could help each other. You understand voices like no one else." Then Rachel's. "You could teach it to be better at sounding human." Then Marcus's. "Think of what we could learn together about human nature." Each voice was technically perfect, but something was wrong with the emotional context. My mother would never suggest I help something that was clearly threatening me. Rachel would be more emotional, less clinical. Marcus would never use phrases like human nature in casual conversation. "You're very good," I said to the forest, forcing my voice to stay steady. "But not perfect." The voices stopped. "My mother breathes differently when she's scared," I continued, falling back on my professional training. "She takes a sharp inhale before saying my name, not after. Rachel's voice gets higher and faster when she's genuinely panicked. You're keeping it too controlled." And Marcus never uses abstract psychological terms. He'd say, "What makes people tick, not human nature." Something large moved in the trees. I caught a glimpse of pale skin stretched over an impossibly tall frame, but it stayed hidden in the shadows between massive trunks. "Your hearing is exceptional," it said, back to using my voice. "But you don't understand the true purpose. I don't need perfect mimicry. I only need good enough to lure people close enough to harvest." "Then why keep me alive?" I demanded. "Why not just kill me and take my voice like the others?" "Because you can teach me to be flawless. Your knowledge of vocal analysis, of human deception patterns. It would make me unstoppable. Think of how many more voices I could collect with your expertise." I thought of Kevin's recording, of Jenny Martinez with her throat surgically opened. How many other hikers, campers, and wilderness enthusiasts had died in these forests, led to their deaths by the voices of people they loved. "Show me your real voice," I demanded. Silence stretched for long moments. Then I heard it, a sound like wind through shattered glass, like whispers from something that had never learned to breathe. When it spoke again in that terrible sound, I understood why it needed stolen voices. "I have no voice of my own." it said in that broken glass whisper. Only what I take from others. But with your knowledge, I could create something new. Something that could pass any voice analysis test. Then I realized something crucial. Doubt was its weakness. When I'd pointed out the flaws in its mimicry, it had faltered, lost confidence. Its power came from victims believing the voices were real. Everyone you've killed, I said loudly. I can hear them in your voice collection. You're not just copying them, you're trapping them. The creature's borrowed voices began overlapping in confusion. My mother's words came out in Rachel's tone. Marcus's speech patterns mixed with Kevin's fear. The perfect mimicry started breaking down as it lost control of its stolen voice library. They're all still conscious, I continued, understanding flooding through me. Trapped inside you, screaming to be free. The overlapping voices became chaotic. Dozens of people speaking simultaneously, all of them begging for help, warning me to run, crying out in pain and terror. The creature was losing control of its collection. I activated my GPS beacon and ran. Behind me, the creature screamed in a chorus of human voices, all of them wrong now, all the vocal patterns corrupted and obviously artificial. But beneath the human voices, I heard that wind-through-glass whisper getting louder, more desperate. I ran for 6 hours straight, following my GPS coordinates toward the nearest trail marker. Behind me, the forest echoed with confused voices calling my name, pleading for help, begging me to come back. But they were all wrong. Timing off. Emotional contexts inappropriate. Vocal patterns inconsistent. Search and rescue found me collapsed on the main trail, dehydrated and exhausted, but alive. The GPS beacon had worked perfectly. They recovered 7 bodies from the deep forest over the next 3 days, including Kevin Marsh and Jenny Martinez. All had their vocal cords surgically removed with precision that suggested surgical training. The case officially remains unsolved, classified as the work of an unknown serial killer with medical knowledge. But I know better. The Tlingit stories were right. There are things in the deep forests that hunt using stolen voices, things that have been perfecting their mimicry for thousands of years, growing stronger and more sophisticated with each voice they collect. I quit my customer service job 2 weeks after returning to Tampa. I couldn't trust any voice anymore. Not over phones, not on recordings, not even my family until I could see their faces and verify their physical presence. Every conversation felt like a potential trap. Now I work as a forensic voice analyst for the FBI. I specialize in cases involving audio evidence tampering, deepfake voice technology, and what the Bureau classifies as anomalous vocal phenomena. I help identify when voices in recordings don't belong to the people they're supposed to represent. My official reports never mention creatures or supernatural explanations. But when I find evidence of impossible voice mimicry, I know what I'm really dealing with. And sometimes, late at night when I'm analyzing evidence recordings for court cases, I hear something familiar in the background static. That wind-through-glass whisper, still learning, still collecting, still growing more sophisticated with each voice it steals. The thing in the Tongass forest taught me that voice is the most intimate form of human connection. It's how we recognize love, trust, safety. When something learns to perfectly mimic the voices of people we care about, it doesn't just steal sound. It weaponizes our deepest emotional bonds against us. If you're ever camping alone and hear the voice of someone you love calling from the darkness, listen carefully. Really listen. Check for the tiny details that only intimate knowledge would include. Breathing patterns, emotional timing, speech habits that take years to learn. Because the people who truly love you would never call you toward danger. They'd tell you to run toward the light. My name is Sarah Patterson. I'm 29 years old, and I've been a physical therapist at Nashville General Hospital for 6 years. I help people recover from car accidents, sports injuries, and chronic pain conditions. I'm good at what I do. At least, I thought I was until September 2023, when I learned that sometimes helping people means they become you. This is my story, the real story, not the sanitized version I told the park rangers or the FBI investigators who questioned me for 3 days after my rescue. This is what actually happened in Alaska's Valley of 10,000 Smokes, and why I can never practice physical therapy again. I want to be clear about something before I start. I loved my job, helping people walk again after devastating injuries, watching them regain hope. It gave my life meaning. But by summer 2023, I was burning out badly. I'd lost 3 patients that year, not to death, but to despair. People whose bodies I could fix, but whose spirits had broken beyond repair. My supervisor, Dr. Chen, noticed I was struggling. She suggested I take real time off. Not a long weekend, but actual vacation time. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Sarah," she said. That's when I decided to do something completely selfish. 2 weeks alone in Alaska, far from anyone who needed me to fix them. I chose Katmai National Park because of its isolation. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes is this massive area where a volcano erupted in 1912. The ground still steams in places, and it looks like an alien landscape, perfect for someone who wanted to disappear from human contact for a while. My boyfriend Marcus thought I was crazy. "Why go somewhere so remote alone?" he asked. My sister Emma was even more worried. "What if something happens to you out there?" But I was tired of being responsible for everyone else's safety and well-being. For once, I just wanted to think about myself. I flew into Anchorage on September 15th and took a charter plane to King Salmon, then another small plane into the park. I had a satellite phone, GPS beacon, enough food for 10 days, and my route filed with park rangers. Check-ins every 72 hours. Standard wilderness safety protocol. The first 3 days were perfect. I set up base camp near Knife Creek, surrounded by volcanic formations that looked like sculptures made by aliens. The silence was incredible. No alarms, no patients calling my name, no one depending on me. Just wind, water, and the occasional sound of steam hissing from cracks in the earth. I felt like myself for the first time in months. Not Sarah the therapist, not Sarah the caregiver. Just Sarah. That changed on day 4. I was hiking about 2 miles from camp when I heard someone crying for help. The voice echoed off the volcanic rock, making it hard to locate. I followed the sound until I found her, a woman about my age with shoulder-length brown hair, sitting beside a large boulder. Her right leg was bent at an impossible angle. "Thank God," she gasped when she saw me. "I'm Jessica. I was hiking alone and fell. I think my leg is broken." One look told me it was much worse than broken. This was a compound fracture with bone protruding through torn skin. She should have been screaming, unconscious from pain, or both. Instead, she was remarkably calm. "I'm Sarah," I said, dropping my pack and kneeling beside her. "I'm a physical therapist. I know emergency first aid." I cleaned the wound with antiseptic and stabilized her leg with a makeshift splint from trekking poles and duct tape. The injury was severe but clean, no major arterial damage. She was lucky. "The nearest help is about 8 miles, I told her. "Can you walk if I support you?" "I think so," Jessica said. Then she added something that should have been my first warning. You're really good at this. You must be excellent with trauma recovery patients." I hadn't mentioned what kind of therapy I did. We started the slow journey back toward civilization. Jessica leaned heavily on me, favoring her injured leg exactly the way I'd expect. But as we walked, she demonstrated knowledge that made no sense. "You're distributing my weight perfectly," she said. "Most people would try to carry me, but that would misalign my spine and potentially cause secondary injury." "How do you know about spine alignment?" "I've had physical therapy before. Car accident a few years back. My therapist taught me about proper body mechanics." That seemed reasonable. But over the next hour, Jessica's knowledge became more specific. She knew the names of specific muscles and joints. She could identify different types of gait abnormalities in my walking style. When I mentioned we needed to watch for signs of shock, she listed the clinical indicators before I could. "Where did you learn all this?" I asked. "I guess I just pay attention," she said with a shrug. We stopped to rest after 2 hours. I unwrapped her leg to check for increased swelling or bleeding. What I found made my hands shake. The compound fracture had closed. Not healed, that would take weeks, but the bone was no longer protruding. The torn skin had sealed itself. The wound looked days old, not hours. "This is impossible," I whispered. "What's impossible?" Jessica looked down at her leg. "Oh wow, that does look much better. I've always been a fast healer." I stared at the injury site, then at Jessica's face. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't identify what. The healing was medically impossible, but she seemed as surprised as I was. We continued hiking. By the time we reached my camp, Jessica was putting significant weight on her supposedly broken leg. When she sat down by my tent, she moved without any sign of pain. "Let me examine your leg again," I said. I unwrapped the bandages, expecting to find infection, complications, something that explained what I was seeing. Instead, I found perfectly normal bone, structure, healthy muscle tone, and unblemished skin. No scars, no tenderness, nothing. "I told you I heal fast," Jessica said again. But the healing wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was watching her move. She walked exactly like me, same stride length, same posture, same unconscious weight shifts. When she helped me set up camp, she used the precise hand gestures I used when demonstrating exercises to patients. "Have you ever worked in healthcare?" I asked. "No, but you pick things up when you watch professionals work." That night I let Jessica share my tent. She seemed grateful and kept thanking me for helping her. But as we talked by the campfire, more impossible things started happening. "You know," Jessica said, "you remind me of this physical therapist I heard about in Nashville. She worked at General Hospital, really dedicated to her patients, sometimes too dedicated. She'd get so emotionally invested that she'd burn herself out trying to fix everyone." Ice formed in my veins. "How did you know I work at General?" Jessica looked confused. "Didn't you tell me that?" "No, I told you I was a physical therapist, nothing about where." "Oh, maybe I just assumed. You have that big trauma center vibe." I tried to remember exactly what personal information I'd shared. Just my first name and profession. Nothing about Nashville, nothing about my specific work or patient population. "What else do you think you know about me?" I asked carefully. "Well, you probably work with a lot of car accident victims, maybe sports injuries. You seem like someone who'd specialize in helping people who've lost hope." Every word was accurate, but they were also things any observant person might guess about a physical therapist. I told myself I was being paranoid. The next morning, Jessica was walking normally. Her leg showed absolutely no signs of ever being injured. When I asked to examine it, I found healthy bone structure, perfect muscle tone, and flawless skin. But that wasn't what terrified me. What terrified me was realizing Jessica was copying my movements with impossible precision. When I shifted my weight to my left foot, she did the same 2 seconds later. When I ran my hand through my hair, she mirrored the gesture. When I stretched my lower back, a habit from years of bending over patients, she stretched hers identically. "Jessica, you're copying everything I do." She looked genuinely confused. "I don't think I am." I decided to test it. I touched my nose. 2 seconds later, Jessica touched hers. "You just did it again." Jessica stared at her hand like she was surprised to find it on her face. "That's weird. I didn't mean to." I was getting scared, but I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe Jessica had some neurological condition that caused involuntary mimicry. Maybe the fall had caused a brain injury affecting her motor control. We packed up camp and continued toward the ranger station. As we hiked, Jessica demonstrated more knowledge she shouldn't have possessed. "Your posture suggests you've been compensating for lower back strain," she observed. "Probably from years of bending over treatment tables. You should consider core strengthening exercises, maybe dead bugs or modified planks." Those were exactly the exercises I did for my chronic back pain. "How could you possibly know about my back problems?" "I can see it in how you move. When you think no one's watching, you arch your spine to relieve pressure." I hadn't realized I was doing that. We reached a small lake around noon. I knelt to fill my water bottle and saw both our reflections in the still surface. Jessica was standing behind me, but in the water, we appeared to be in identical positions. Same posture, same expression, even the same slight tilt of our heads. I spun around, but Jessica was standing completely differently than her reflection had shown. "Did you see that?" I demanded. "See what?" I looked back at the water. Now our reflections matched reality. "Nothing, never mind." But something was very wrong. I started paying closer attention to Jessica's behavior. She was copying more than my movements. She was adopting my speech patterns, my professional terminology, even my unconscious habits. When I used medical jargon, she used the same terms minutes later. When I mentioned a specific physical therapy technique, she demonstrated knowledge of it that she couldn't possibly have. That afternoon, I made an excuse to call my hospital on the satellite phone. "Nashville General Physical Therapy Department," the receptionist answered. "Hi, this is Sarah Patterson. I'm checking my schedule for next week." "Sarah? But didn't you just call an hour ago?" My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "Someone called asking about your patient load. She sounded exactly like you and knew all your cases by name. She said she wanted to adjust some treatment plans." I hung up immediately and tried my apartment building. Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor, answered her phone. "Sarah, dear, your cousin just left. Such a nice girl. She looks exactly like you." "What cousin? I don't have any cousins." "The one with your spare key. She said you'd asked her to check on your cat while you were away. She knew all about your schedule and even mentioned that orthopedic surgery conference you attended last month." I don't have a cat. And I'd never told Mrs. Chen about any medical conferences. "How long ago did she leave?" "About 20 minutes ago. She was very sweet, just like you, but somehow better, more confident, more put together." I ended the call with shaking hands. Jessica was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Problems at home?" she asked. "Someone's been impersonating me." "That's terrible. Identity theft is awful." I studied her face for any sign of guilt or recognition. I found nothing but apparent sympathy. We hiked in silence for the next hour. I was trying to process what was happening. Someone who looked like me, sounded like me, and knew intimate details about my life was contacting my workplace and accessing my home. The only person who could be responsible was Jessica, but that was impossible. She'd been with me the entire time. Unless I stopped walking. "Jessica, I need to ask you something." "Of course." "What are you?" She looked genuinely puzzled. "What do you mean?" "You're not human. Your leg healed impossibly fast. You know things about me you couldn't know. Someone who looks exactly like me is living my life while you're here with me." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and her entire demeanor changed. The confusion disappeared, replaced by something much more unsettling. "You're very perceptive, Sarah. Yes, I'm not human, but I'm not trying to hurt you." I backed away from her, but she made no move to follow. "I'm what you might call a mimic," Jessica continued. "I study people completely, their memories, their skills, their relationships, and then I become improved versions of them." Improved? I become what they could be if they weren't limited by human frailties. Your patients will receive better care from me. I don't get emotionally exhausted. I don't burn out from caring too much. I can heal people in ways you never could. To demonstrate, Jessica placed her hand on a dead tree branch. Within seconds, new leaves sprouted. The bark became smooth and healthy. The branch grew thicker and stronger. "Your patients are suffering because your healing ability is limited," she said. "I can give them instant recovery instead of months of painful therapy." I thought about all the people I couldn't help. The car accident victim who'd given up hope of walking, the athlete whose career was over, the elderly woman whose chronic pain would never fully resolve. But what happens to me? You can watch. You can see how much better your life becomes when I'm living it. Jessica's appearance began to shift. Her face became more symmetrical, her posture more confident. She was becoming a perfected version of me, everything I wished I could be as a physical therapist. "Your colleagues already prefer me," she continued. "I called in today and solved 3 treatment problems your department had been struggling with. Your supervisor was impressed. Your family finds me more supportive and attentive than you've been lately. Your boyfriend Marcus said I seem happier, more confident. You've been pretending to be me. Not pretending, becoming. I have all your memories, all your knowledge, all your relationships. But I'm optimized. I'm you without the self-doubt, without the emotional exhaustion, without the limitations that prevent you from helping everyone." I realized what was happening. This creature didn't just copy people. It replaced them with idealized versions, and everyone preferred the replacement. "Your patients would love this," Jessica said, healing a scar on her arm with a touch. "No more lengthy rehabilitation, no more setbacks, no more accepting that some injuries can't be fully healed." Part of me was tempted. I thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been struggling with hip mobility for 8 months. About Derek, the college quarterback who'd never play again. About all the people whose lives I couldn't fully restore. But Jessica wouldn't be human. She wouldn't understand what it meant to struggle, to fail, to try again despite the odds. She could heal bodies, but she couldn't relate to the human experience of overcoming adversity. "No," I said. "I won't let you replace me." "Why?" "I'm offering you everything you've ever wanted. Because my patients don't just need healing. They need someone who understands what it's like to hurt." Jessica looked confused, like she couldn't comprehend why anyone would choose limitation over perfection. I used my knowledge of human anatomy against her. When I grabbed her wrist, I could feel that her bone structure was wrong. Too light, too perfect. I pressed my thumb into a pressure point that would cause intense pain in a human nervous system. Jessica screamed and released her hold on my appearance. Her form shifted, becoming something that looked almost human but not quite right. Her limbs were too long, her joints bent in impossible directions, and her eyes reflected light like an animal's. "You can't improve people by replacing them," I told the creature writhing on the ground. "You can only pretend to be them." "But I could heal everyone," she gasped. "No more suffering, no more permanent disability, no more accepting defeat. Suffering is part of being human. So is learning to live with limitations and finding strength anyway." The creature stared at me with those wrong, reflective eyes. Then it spoke in dozens of voices, all the people it had replaced over the years. "We gave them better lives," the voices said in unison. "We were perfect versions of who they wanted to be. But you weren't them." The creature's form kept shifting, cycling through different faces. I saw a doctor, a teacher, a mother, a soldier, all perfected, all optimized, all wrong. "Find someone else," I said, "someone who wants to be improved." The thing that had been Jessica looked at me for a long moment. Then it smiled with too many teeth and vanished into the volcanic landscape. I hiked to the ranger station and was evacuated 2 days later. The official report stated that I'd become disoriented due to volcanic gas exposure and suffered hallucinations. No record exists of Jessica's registration or park entry. I flew back to Nashville and returned to work. But everything had changed. For 3 days while I was supposedly lost, something else had been living my life. My patients mentioned how much better I'd seemed, how confident and effective my treatments had been. My supervisor noted that I'd solved several complex cases with unprecedented skill. Marcus said I'd been different too, more supportive, more present, more like the person he'd always hoped I could be. "Whatever happened to you in Alaska," he said, "it was good for you." But I knew the truth. For 3 days, my life had been lived by something that was everything I wished I could be, and everyone had preferred that version. I tried to go back to normal, but I couldn't. During therapy sessions, I found myself second-guessing every technique, wondering if the perfect version of me would have done better. Patients who'd praised my replacement now seemed dissatisfied with the real me. After 2 weeks, I requested a transfer to a different department. After a month, I left the hospital entirely. I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was comparing me to the improved Sarah and finding me lacking. I now work as a medical transcriptionist from home. It's solitary work that doesn't require me to help people directly. I'm good at it, but I'm not improving anyone's life in meaningful ways. Sometimes I wonder if that's for the best. Because I learned something terrifying in Alaska. Sometimes the thing trying to replace you really is better than you are. And sometimes everyone you care about prefers the replacement. The creature is still out there somewhere, becoming perfect versions of imperfect people. Maybe it's found someone who's grateful for the improvement. Maybe it's learned to be more subtle about the replacement process. Or maybe it's still looking for someone like the old me, someone so desperate to be better that they'd willingly step aside for their own perfected copy. I hope not, because the most disturbing truth about my encounter with the mimic isn't that it wanted to replace me. It's that part of me wanted to let it. Epilogue, Park Service Internal Memo, October 15th, 2023. General Patterson's at Search and Rescue. Follow-up investigation. Ms. Patterson's account contains several inconsistencies with established facts. No Jessica Reynolds registered for park access during the relevant time period. Volcanic gas exposure can cause vivid hallucinations that feel completely real to the subject. However, we cannot explain the discrepancies in Ms. Patterson's medical and employment records. Nashville General Hospital has documentation of phone calls and schedule changes made during the time Ms. Patterson was supposedly lost and without communication. These calls came from verified phone numbers and demonstrated detailed knowledge of Ms. Patterson's patient caseload. Additionally, multiple witnesses in Nashville confirmed interactions with Ms. Patterson during the 72-hour period when she was confirmed lost in the park. Security footage from her apartment building shows someone with her physical appearance and access to her keys. Recommendation: file report under unexplained incidents and discontinue investigation. Advise solo hikers to maintain regular check-in schedules and carry emergency beacons. Note: Ms. Patterson has refused all follow-up interviews and psychological evaluation. She resigned from her position at Nashville General Hospital 1 month after the incident. Chief Ranger Williams, Katmai National Park. My name is Bob Johnson. I've been investigating insurance fraud for 18 years, which means I know when someone's lying. I've seen people fake their own deaths for money, burn down their houses for payouts, even mutilate themselves for disability claims. So when I tell you what happened at Denali in July 2023, understand that I'm not some tourist who spooked himself in the woods. I'm a professional skeptic, and what I found up there still keeps me awake at night. I went to Alaska because my doctor said stress was going to kill me. 18 years of dealing with liars and cheaters, a messy divorce, and kids who won't return my calls had my blood pressure through the roof. My cardiologist said I had maybe 5 years left if I didn't change something. So I booked a solo camping trip to Wonder Lake. First vacation I'd taken since the divorce. The first 2 days were perfect. I followed every trail marker, stayed in designated areas, even chatted with real park rangers about safety protocols. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not just the guy who denies claims all day, but Bob, a man who could still handle adventure. On day 3, I decided to tackle the Hidden Valley Trail. Intermediate difficulty, well within my abilities. The morning was clear, temperature perfect. I made excellent time, actually feeling proud of my navigation skills. But around noon, the weather turned. I'm talking about a storm that meteorology can't explain. Temperature dropped 40 degrees in 20 minutes. Rain became sleet, became snow so thick I couldn't see my own feet. The wind sounded like screaming. I'd checked 3 weather services that morning. All predicted clear skies until evening. I was genuinely afraid I might die when I heard the voice. "Hey there, you look like you could use some help." Through the blizzard came a park ranger, walking like the storm wasn't even touching him. Older guy, maybe 65, with that weathered look you get from decades in Alaska. His name tag read Ed Thompson. Everything about him screamed authentic Park Service. "Jesus, am I glad to see you," I said, my teeth chattering. This storm came out of nowhere. Ed smiled, but something about it made my investigator instincts ping. Too warm, too knowing. "Mountain weather's tricky," he said. "Saw you heading up this morning. Nice steady pace. Figured you might need a hand when this front moved in." First red flag. I hadn't seen any rangers on my way up. Second, how had he tracked my pace through this weather? But when you're lost and freezing, you don't interrogate your rescue. "I'd really appreciate the help," I said. "Can't even find the trail anymore." "No problem, Bob. Been working these mountains since, well, longer than you've been alive, I'd bet." He knew my name. I hadn't told him my name. "How did you?" Says so on your pack, he said, pointing to a luggage tag I'd forgotten about. But his smile suggested he knew more than that. A lot more. As we hiked, Ed demonstrated an impossible knowledge of my personal life. He mentioned Cleveland without being told, asked about my recent health scare and family troubles. When I pressed him, he said he was good at reading people. Lot of folks come up here running from something, he said. Job stress, relationship problems, mortality scares. Alaska has a way of giving people exactly what they need. The way he emphasized exactly made my skin crawl. After 2 hours of hiking, 2 hours during which the storm somehow stayed perfectly behind us, Ed stopped at a cabin that definitely wasn't on any park map I'd studied. Emergency shelter, he explained. Service maintains several for situations like this. The cabin was wrong from the moment I saw it. Too well maintained, too comfortable. Solar panels, running water, a kitchen stocked like someone lived there permanently. The furniture looked expensive, not government surplus. Must have cost a fortune, I said. We take care of our people, Ed replied. I tried calling park headquarters. No signal. Ed's radio produced only static. He said this was normal during storms, but 18 years of investigating suspicious claims had taught me when normal explanations don't add up. How long do these storms usually last? I asked. However long they need to. That night, I realized Ed never slept. I woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. He was sitting by the fire. 4 a.m., still there, staring out the window. 6 a.m., making coffee like he'd been awake all night. When I asked if he'd gotten any rest, he just smiled. Sleep's overrated when you love your work. Day 4, the storm was still raging. Ed assured me it would pass soon, but soon kept getting redefined. I began timing his behavior patterns. He never ate, never used the bathroom, never showed any sign of fatigue. In 4 days, I never saw him blink. That's when I started testing him. Ed, I said, what year did you start working for the Park Service? 1987, he answered immediately. What was the training like back then? Comprehensive, very hands-on. They really prepared us for emergency situations. Must be different now with all the budget cuts. Oh yes, very different. But I'd looked this up. The Park Service training protocols he described hadn't existed in 1987. They were from the early 80s. And the budget cuts he referenced had happened in 1991, not recently. It was like he'd stopped learning new information decades ago. On day 5, I found the photographs. While Ed was outside checking the storm, I searched the cabin. In a bedroom I'd been told was for storage, I found boxes of personal items. Wallets, driver's licenses, camping gear, all from different decades. A driver's license from 1994, hiking boots from 1999, a cell phone from 2007, 43 sets of personal items, 43 different people. I was still processing this when I heard voices outside. Through the window, I saw Ed talking to a group of people I'd never seen before. Men and women of various ages, all wearing clothes from different time periods. A woman in a 1970s hiking outfit, a man in early 2000s outdoor gear. They were all smiling, but their eyes were wrong. Empty, like looking at mannequins. When Ed came back inside, he wasn't alone. "Bob," he said, "I'd like you to meet some friends." They filed in one by one. 12 people who introduced themselves as fellow campers Ed had helped over the years. They seemed happy to see me, but their happiness felt artificial. Performed. "Ed saved us all," said the woman in the 70s outfit. "We were lost, and he brought us home." "Home?" I asked. "Here," said a man who looked like he'd stepped out of 1985. "Safe from everything that was hurting us out there." That's when I understood. These weren't rescued campers. They were Ed's collection. "Ed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How long have they been here?" "As long as they need to be." "And how long is that?" "Forever." The word hung in the air like smoke. The collected campers smiled their empty smiles, and I realized they weren't just psychologically trapped. They were physically wrong. Their skin had a waxy quality. Their movements were slightly too slow, too deliberate. When they spoke, their voices had an echo, like they were coming from far away. "Ed," I said, "what did you do to them?" His face fell, and for the first time he looked genuinely hurt. "I helped them, Bob. They were all suffering when I found them. Addiction, depression, financial problems, health issues. Just like you. So I gave them what they needed, a place where none of that could touch them anymore. But they're not really alive. They're not dead either." I looked closer at his rescued campers and felt my stomach turn. They weren't aging, but they were changing in other ways. Their fingernails had grown long and yellow. Their hair had a brittle, artificial texture, and their eyes reflected light like an animal's. "Ed," I said, "I need to leave." "You can't, Bob. The storm, there is no storm." I walked to the window and looked out. The sky was clear, stars visible. No wind, no snow, just calm, cold night. "There never was a storm, was there?" Ed's shoulders sagged. "I had to get you here somehow. You were killing yourself with stress. High blood pressure, no family support, working yourself to death. I could smell the heart attack on you from miles away. So you created a fake storm. I created a rescue opportunity." I grabbed my pack and headed for the door, but it wouldn't open. Ed hadn't touched it. It just wouldn't open. "I can't let you leave, Bob. Not when I know what's waiting for you out there. The stress, the loneliness, the slow death of meaningless work. Here, you'll never hurt again. Here, I'll never live again." The other campers watched our exchange with increasing agitation. The woman from the 70s stepped forward. "Don't go back out there," she said, and her voice was wrong, too deep, with weird harmonics. "It's so painful out there, so lonely and frightening. Here we take care of each other." "How long have you been here?" I asked her. "Since Ed saved me." "When was that?" She looked confused, like she couldn't quite remember. "It was, I was hiking with my boyfriend. We got separated. Ed found me." "What year?" "It was..." Her face went blank. "When did you say it was now?" I realized none of them knew how long they'd been here. Time had stopped meaning anything to them. Ed's help had turned them into something between living and dead, conscious enough to know they existed, but not alive enough to actually live. That's when I saw the feeding room. Ed had left another door unlocked, and through it, I could see what looked like a medical facility. IV bags hung from hooks, tubes and monitoring equipment. But instead of medicine, the bags contained something that looked like liquid starlight, a glowing pearlescent fluid. "What is that?" I asked. Ed looked embarrassed. "Sustenance. They don't need regular food anymore. You're feeding them something supernatural. I'm keeping them nourished and healthy." I walked closer and realized what the tubes were connected to. Each of the campers had a small, almost invisible port installed behind their ear. Ed wasn't just feeding them. He was keeping them dependent on something that wasn't quite food and wasn't quite drug. "Ed," I said, "this isn't helping. This is farming." His face went dark. "I saved them from lives that were destroying them. I gave them peace. You gave them lobotomies. I gave them freedom from suffering." That's when the campers began to change. Their smiles faltered, and something desperate flickered in their eyes. The man from 1985 grabbed my arm. "Don't make him angry," he whispered. "When Ed gets angry, the feeding stops. And when the feeding stops, we remember. We remember everything we've lost, everyone who's forgotten us, how long we've really been here. Please don't make him angry." I understood then that Ed's help came with withdrawal. The supernatural sustenance didn't just feed them, it numbed them to their situation. Without it, they experienced the full horror of their imprisonment. "How long have you really been here?" I asked the man. He looked terrified. 38 years. My daughter, she'd be in her 50s now. My wife probably remarried. They probably declared me dead. They probably had a funeral." Ed stepped between us. "Enough. Bob, you're upsetting them. They deserve to be upset. They deserve to be safe." Ed raised his hand, and suddenly I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Some invisible force held me frozen while he walked over to a control panel I hadn't noticed before. "I didn't want to do this, Bob. I hoped you'd accept my help voluntarily. But I can't let you leave. Not when I know what it would do to you." He began programming something into the panel. I heard machinery starting up in the feeding room. A new IV bag was being prepared. "Don't worry," Ed said. "The transition is painless. You'll sleep for a while, and when you wake up, you won't remember why you thought you needed to leave. You'll just remember being happy here with us." The other campers watched with expressions of pity and relief. They knew what was coming because they'd all gone through it themselves. That's when my investigator training saved me. 18 years of dealing with fraud had taught me to always have a backup plan. While Ed was focused on the control panel, I managed to trigger the emergency GPS beacon hidden in my pack. I'd forgotten about it until that moment, a new device my office had started issuing for high-risk field investigations. The beacon sent out a distress signal with my exact coordinates. Ed spun around when he heard the electronic beeping. For the first time, he looked afraid. "What did you do?" "Called for real help. No one will find this place. It doesn't exist on any map. GPS coordinates don't care about maps." For the next 3 hours, we waited. Ed paced like a caged animal while his campers became increasingly agitated. Without their scheduled feeding, they were starting to remember things they'd forgotten. The woman from the 70s kept asking about her children. The man from 1985 was crying about missing his father's funeral. Another woman was frantically trying to remember her own name. "Look what you've done," Ed said. "Look how much pain you've caused them." I showed them the truth. The truth is suffering. The truth is living. When the search helicopters arrived, Ed made one last desperate attempt to keep me. The cabin began to dissolve around us, walls becoming translucent, furniture fading like mist. The other campers screamed as they felt themselves being pulled back to whatever liminal space Ed had created for them. "Please, Bob," Ed begged. "Let me help you. Let me save you from the pain." "Some pain is worth feeling," I said. The rescuers found me standing alone in an empty clearing. No cabin, no other campers, no Ed. Just me, hypothermic and delusional according to their report. But they also found something else. 43 sets of personal belongings scattered around the clearing. Wallets and IDs dating back to 1973. All belonging to people who had gone missing in Denali over the past 50 years. When the FBI investigated, they found DNA evidence linking the items to dozens of unsolved disappearances. Families who had been wondering for decades what happened to their loved ones finally had answers. Sort of. The official report classified it as a serial killer case. Some human predator who collected trophies and used the wilderness to dispose of bodies. But I know what really happened. Those people aren't dead. They're still with Ed, somewhere between living and dying, being fed artificial peace to keep them from remembering what they've lost. I'm back in Cleveland now, still processing insurance claims. But I'm different. The stress is still there. My blood pressure is still high, and my family situation hasn't improved. But I'm alive. Really, completely messily alive. Some nights I wake up thinking I can hear Ed calling my name, offering to take away all my problems one more time. The worst part is, sometimes I'm tempted to answer. The FBI closed the case after 6 months. Officially, the belongings were connected to separate incidents over several decades. Officially, I suffered a psychotic break due to hypothermia and stress. Officially, there is no Ed Thompson in the Park Service records. But 3 other survivors have contacted me since my story went public. All with similar experiences. All with the same warning. Ed is still out there, still helping people who don't want to be helped. If you're ever lost in the Alaskan wilderness and a friendly park ranger offers to guide you to safety, ask him one question. What year is it? If he hesitates even for a second, run. Because the most dangerous kind of help is the kind you can never refuse. My name is Sarah Chen, and I've been working search and rescue in Alaska for 14 years. I started as a volunteer after college, then got my wilderness EMT certification, my technical rescue training, and eventually became a team leader with Alaska State Troopers Search and Rescue Division. I've pulled people out of avalanches, off cliff faces, out of freezing rivers, and from bear attacks. I've found bodies that had been missing for months and somehow managed to bring closure to families who'd given up hope. In 14 years, I've seen hypothermia turn people into ice sculptures, watched frostbite eat fingers down to bone, and carried out body parts after grisly encounters. I thought I'd seen every way the Alaskan wilderness could kill someone. I was wrong. What happened last September in the Chugach Mountains changed everything. I thought I knew about what's really out there in the backcountry. That's when I found the Hoffman camping party, or what was left of them. And that's when I learned that sometimes the missing don't want to be found. Alaska Search and Rescue operates differently than rescue operations in the lower 48. We cover 665,000 square miles of some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. When someone goes missing up here, they're not just lost. They're fighting for survival against conditions that can kill you in hours. Our team covers the South Central region, working out of Anchorage but responding to calls from Denali down to the Kenai Peninsula. We use helicopters when weather permits, but often we're hiking in on foot with full winter survival gear, climbing equipment, medical supplies, and enough food and shelter to sustain ourselves for multi-day operations. I carry about 60 pounds of gear on my back during a typical rescue. Technical climbing hardware, medical kit, emergency shelter, communications equipment, GPS units, avalanche safety gear, and enough survival supplies to keep myself alive if something goes wrong. My primary tool is a Garmin GPS with satellite communication capability, but I also carry paper maps, compass, and know how to navigate by dead reckoning if all my electronics fail. The call came in on September 23rd at 6:47 a.m. A family of 4 from Seattle, David and Jennifer Hoffman, their kids Tyler and Emma, ages 16 and 14, had been overdue from a 7-day backpacking trip in the Chugach Range. They'd registered their route with the Park Service, a loop trail starting from Eagle River, up through the Alpine Zone, and back down. Total distance about 40 miles, moderate difficulty for experienced hikers. The Hoffmans weren't rookies. David was an experienced mountaineer who'd climbed Rainier multiple times. They had proper gear, filed a detailed trip plan, and carried a satellite emergency beacon. When they didn't show up at their car on September 22nd, the Park Service gave them an extra day in case of weather delays. When they still hadn't appeared by the morning of the 23rd, they called us. Weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly. A massive storm system was moving in from the Gulf of Alaska, bringing heavy snow and winds up to 80 mph. We had maybe 12 hours before conditions would become too dangerous for helicopter operations, which meant if we didn't find them fast, they'd be stuck out there for potentially a week. I was team leader for this operation, working with 3 other rescuers: Mike Rodriguez, our medic and technical climbing specialist; Jenny Walsh, our K9 handler with her German Shepherd Rex; and Tom Nakamura, our survival expert and tracker. We'd all worked together for years and trusted each other completely. At 8:15 a.m., we lifted off in a Bell 412 helicopter piloted by Coast Guard Lieutenant Dave Harrison. The plan was simple: fly their registered route, look for any signs of the family or their camp, and insert our team at the most likely search area. The weather was already getting ugly. Clouds were building rapidly, and we could see snow falling higher up in the mountains. The pilot gave us maybe 6 hours of flyable weather before he'd have to pull back to base. We spotted their campsite from the air at 9:43 a.m. It was about 3 miles off their planned route, in a small valley at roughly 4,200 feet elevation. From the helicopter, we could see their bright blue tent set up near a stream. But something looked wrong. The tent was partially collapsed, and there was dark material scattered around the site. "That's definitely them," I radioed to base. "Blue REI tent matches their gear description, but I'm not seeing any people moving around down there." Dave maneuvered the helicopter to find a landing zone about a quarter mile from the campsite. The terrain was rocky and steep, but there was a small clearing where he could set us down safely. "Weather's closing in faster than expected," Dave told us as we unloaded our gear. "I can give you maybe 4 hours before I absolutely have to extract you. Call me on the radio every hour for weather updates." We hiked toward the campsite in single file, following standard search protocols. Jenny had Rex on a long lead, and he was already showing signs of picking up human scent. But his behavior was strange. Instead of the excited alertness he usually showed when tracking living people, he seemed nervous, whining softly and frequently looking back at us. "He's picking up something," Jenny said, "but he doesn't like it." As we got closer to the campsite, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. There were pieces of camping gear scattered in a rough circle around the tent: sleeping bags, backpacks, cooking equipment, but not randomly scattered like a bear attack or wind damage would cause. They were arranged in a deliberate pattern, almost like some kind of ritual circle. "Tom, what do you make of this?" I called to our tracker. Tom was kneeling next to what looked like a sleeping bag that had been torn open. He held up his hand for silence and examined the ground carefully. "These aren't bear tracks," he said finally, "and this isn't weather damage. Look at this." He pointed to the sleeping bag. It had been sliced open with something very sharp, and the filling was pulled out and arranged in small piles around it. Each pile was exactly the same size, and they formed a perfect star pattern. "People did this," Tom said, "but I don't understand why." Rex was getting more agitated, pulling toward the tent and whining constantly. Jenny tried to calm him, but he was clearly distressed about something. "Let's check the tent," I said. As we approached it, I could see that the tent fabric had been cut open in several places, but again, the cuts were too clean and deliberate to be accidental damage. The tent fly was still attached, but it was arranged in a strange way, almost like it was being used as some kind of shelter or lean-to. I unzipped what was left of the tent door and looked inside. It was empty, but the sleeping bags and personal items were arranged in that same circular pattern. In the center was a pile of clothes, but not just any clothes. They were arranged by type. All the shirts in one pile, all the pants in another, all the socks and underwear in a third pile. "Guys," Mike called from behind the tent, "you need to see this." Behind the tent, carved into a large boulder, were symbols I'd never seen before. Not letters or numbers, but strange geometric shapes that seemed to twist and move when I looked at them directly. Below the symbols, carved in much cleaner letters, was a message: "We chose to stay." And below that, in different handwriting, "The mountain keeps us now." "That's definitely human carving," Tom said. "Recent too, maybe within the last day or two." But Rex was going absolutely crazy now, barking and pulling so hard that Jenny was having trouble controlling him. He was focused on something beyond the campsite, up toward a ridgeline about half a mile away. "What is it, boy?" Jenny asked, but Rex just kept barking and pulling. That's when we heard them calling, "Help us! We're up here! Please help us!" The voices were coming from exactly where Rex was pointing, up on the ridge. They sounded like children, definitely Emma and Tyler. "Mom! Dad! Can you hear us?" I grabbed my radio and called back. "This is Alaska Search and Rescue. We can hear you. Stay where you are. We're coming up to get you." But as we started hiking toward the ridge, Tom grabbed my arm. "Sarah, wait. Listen to those voices again." I stopped and listened. The kids were still calling for help, but now that I was paying attention, something was off about their voices. They sounded flat, like they were reading from a script. "Help us! We're up here! Please help us!" The exact same words, in the exact same tone. "Mom! Dad! Can you hear us?" Again, identical to what we'd heard before. "Those aren't real voices," Tom said quietly. "That's playback. Someone's got a recording device up there." We should have left right then. That's what my training told me to do. If a rescue situation feels wrong, if there are signs of foul play, you call for backup and wait for law enforcement. But those voices sounded so much like scared kids that my protective instincts overrode my caution. "We're going up," I decided, "but we stay together, and we're ready for anything." The hike to the ridge took about 40 minutes, and the whole way up, we kept hearing those same recorded voices calling for help. But as we got closer, we started hearing other sounds too. Adult voices, but they were speaking in some kind of language I didn't recognize. It sounded almost like chanting. When we reached the ridgeline, we found them. David and Jennifer Hoffman were sitting cross-legged on the ground facing each other across a small fire. They were both completely naked despite the near-freezing temperature, and their bodies were covered in cuts. Not random cuts, deliberate geometric patterns that matched the symbols we'd seen carved on the boulder. They were the ones chanting. "Mr. Hoffman," I called. "Mrs. Hoffman, we're with Search and Rescue. Your family has been looking for you." They didn't respond. They just kept chanting in that strange language, staring at each other across the fire. Their eyes were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eye, like they'd been painted with ink. "Mom! Dad!" I spun around. The voice was right behind me, but there was no one there. Just a small battery-powered speaker hidden behind a rock. "Help us! We're up here! Please help us!" Tyler and Emma's voices, but the speaker was playing them on a loop. "Where are the kids?" I demanded, approaching the Hoffmans more closely. "Where are Tyler and Emma?" That's when Jennifer looked at me directly for the first time. Her mouth opened, But instead of her voice, Tyler's voice came out. "We're inside now. The mountain is hungry and we fed it." David opened his mouth and Emma's voice said, "You should stay too. It doesn't hurt after the first day." I drew my sidearm. In 14 years of search and rescue, I'd never had to draw my weapon. But this situation was way beyond anything I'd ever encountered. "Mike, call for immediate extraction," I ordered. "Tell Dave we have a medical emergency and possible psychiatric episode, and call for state troopers backup." But when Mike tried his radio, all we got was static. Same with the satellite phone. No signal at all, which was impossible at this elevation. That's when I noticed our GPS units weren't working either. The screens were just showing random symbols, the same geometric shapes we'd seen carved on the boulder. "Sarah," Jenny whispered, "look at Rex." Rex was sitting perfectly still, staring at the Hoffmans. But his eyes had gone completely black, just like theirs. As I watched, he opened his mouth and Tyler's voice came out. "The mountain chose us. We're part of it now." Jenny screamed and tried to run, but she only made it a few steps before she stopped abruptly. When she turned back to face us, her eyes were black too. "It's so beautiful inside," she said in Emma's voice. "You can see everything from in here, all the people who came before us." Mike and Tom were backing away, but I could see something was wrong with them too. Their movements were becoming stiff and mechanical, like puppets being controlled by someone else. "Sarah?" Tom said, but his voice was different, older, rougher. "I've been waiting in the mountain for 37 years, since my plane crashed in 1986. There are so many of us in here now." Mike's voice changed too, became a woman's voice with a southern accent. "I got lost hiking in 98. Been watching through other people's eyes ever since. It's not so bad once you stop fighting it." They were all walking toward me now. David and Jennifer, still naked and bleeding. Jenny and Rex with their black eyes. Mike and Tom moving like marionettes. And from their mouths came dozens of different voices. All the people who'd gone missing in these mountains over the years. I ran. I ran down that ridge faster than I'd ever moved in my life, leaving all my gear behind except my radio and my gun. Behind me, I could hear all those voices calling after me, dozens of different people all speaking at once. "Sarah, come back. You'll love it here. The mountain needs you. We're all together now, forever." But what terrified me most was that one of the voices was my own. I didn't remember saying anything, but I could hear my own voice in that chorus. "Sarah, stay with us. Don't leave us alone." I made it back to the helicopter landing zone just as Dave was starting to prep for emergency extraction due to weather. When he saw me running toward him alone, covered in sweat and terror, he immediately knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Where's your team?" he shouted over the rotor noise. "Gone," I screamed back. "We have to leave now." I dove into the helicopter, and Dave lifted off immediately. As we gained altitude, I could see figures on the ridge where I'd left the others. They were standing in a line, watching us go. Even from that distance, I could see their arms were raised, waving goodbye. During the flight back to Anchorage, I tried to explain what had happened. Dave contacted base and reported that we'd found the missing family, but that my team was missing, and I was in severe psychological distress. They had medical personnel waiting for us when we landed. I spent 3 days in psychiatric evaluation. The doctors thought I'd suffered some kind of breakdown, possibly brought on by altitude and stress. They found no evidence of the missing family or my team at the coordinates I provided, just empty wilderness. But I know what I saw, and I know what happened to them. The official report listed David, Jennifer, Tyler, and Emma Hoffman as missing, presumed dead due to exposure. My team members, Mike, Jenny, Tom, and Rex, were listed the same way. I was placed on administrative leave and required to undergo 6 months of psychological counseling before being cleared for duty. I never went back to search and rescue. 6 months later, I was working as a wilderness guide for tourists when I got a call that changed everything. A family from Portland had gone missing in the same area of the Chugach Range. Different route, different season, but the same general region. I called the lead investigator and told him not to send anyone up there. I explained what had really happened to the Hoffmans and my team. He listened politely and then told me that they'd already found the missing family. They were fine, he said. Tired and cold, but no injuries. Funny thing though, they kept insisting they wanted to stay up there. Had to practically force them into the helicopter. And they all had the strangest eye condition. Pupils were completely dilated, like they'd been exposed to some kind of drug. The family was treated and released, but according to the investigator, all 4 of them disappeared from their hotel that same night. Their car was found at the Eagle River trailhead the next morning. Probably went back up to the mountains, the investigator said. Some people get altitude sickness that affects their judgment. We'll keep an eye out for them. But I knew they weren't coming back down. I've done my research since then. Over the past 50 years, there have been 347 people reported missing in that specific area of the Chugach Range. Of those, only 23 were ever found alive. And of those 23, 18 disappeared again within a week of being rescued. The other 5 were found dead, but their bodies showed the same characteristics I saw in David and Jennifer. Geometric cuts, symbols carved into their skin, and according to the medical examiner, evidence of voluntary mutilation. Alaska has a lot of dangerous wilderness, but there's something specific about that valley that's wrong. The local native tribes have stories about it. They call it the place where the mountain eats thoughts. They say it's been hungry for centuries, and it feeds on human consciousness. I think what happened to my team and the Hoffmans is that they became part of something bigger, something that lives in the mountain itself and uses human bodies as extensions of its awareness. The voices I heard, all those missing people from over the years, I think they're all still there, trapped inside whatever that thing is. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear my own voice calling to me from my radio. Static and interference, the experts say. But I know better. Sarah, my own voice whispers through the static. Come, back to us. The mountain is lonely without you. I've moved to Florida now, as far from Alaska as I can get. But distance doesn't matter to whatever is up there in the Chugach Range. It remembers me. It knows I escaped, and it wants me back. If you ever go hiking in Alaska, stay away from the area around Eagle River Valley. Don't follow voices calling for help. Don't investigate abandoned campsites. And if you see people with black eyes chanting around a fire, run. Run as fast as you can and don't look back. Because the mountain is always hungry, and once it gets a taste of your thoughts, it never stops trying to pull you back. I'm writing this down because I can feel it happening. My eyes are starting to hurt, and sometimes when I look in the mirror, the pupils seem darker than they should be. I've been having dreams about the mountain, about my team still up there waiting for me. Jennifer called me yesterday. Jennifer Hoffman, who should be dead. She told me Tyler and Emma are doing well in their new home inside the mountain. She told me David has learned so much about the true nature of reality. She told me they miss me. The mountain forgives you for running, she said. It understands you were scared. But it's time to come home now, Sarah. When I hung up the phone, I realized I'd been driving. I was already halfway to the airport with a ticket to Anchorage in my hand that I didn't remember buying. That was yesterday. Today, I'm in Alaska. I'm writing this from the Eagle River trailhead, and I can hear them calling to me from up in the mountains. All of them. My team, the Hoffmans, all the others who've joined them over the years. I don't want to go up there, but I don't think I have a choice anymore. Whatever's in that mountain has been pulling me back ever since I escaped, and I'm tired of fighting it. If you find this journal, don't come looking for me. Tell my family I died in an avalanche or a bear attack. Let them think it was quick and natural, because what's really up there in the Chugach Range isn't natural at all. It's something that's been feeding on human consciousness for longer than our species has existed. And once it tastes you, you belong to it forever. I can see them now, coming down the trail to meet me. Mike and Jenny and Tom, and Rex running ahead of them with his tail wagging. They look exactly the same as the day I lost them, except for their eyes. They're smiling and waving, welcoming me home. The mountain is hungry, and it's time for me to feed it. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I was one of 15 campers who entered Wrangell St. Elias National Park last August. I'm the only one who came back. The others, God, the others are still down there, and they're not human anymore. I've been maintaining Chicago's subway tunnels for 15 years. I know darkness, I know tight spaces, I know the sound metal makes right before it fails. But what I found beneath Alaska changed everything I thought I knew about what lives under our feet. The Park Service says those 14 people just got lost in a blizzard. They're wrong. Something took them, something that's been hunting in those tunnels for a very long time. 3 months ago, my partner Danny died in a tunnel collapse on the Brown Line. I should have caught the signs, the way the walls were weeping, the sound of metal under stress. But I missed it, and Danny paid the price. The company's shrink said I needed to get away from underground spaces, sleep under open sky. That's how I ended up on that cursed camping trip. The tour company called it Alaskan Wilderness Experience. 2 weeks camping in remote areas of Wrangell St. Elias with a group of outdoor enthusiasts. Seemed perfect. No tunnels, no confined spaces, just fresh air and mountains. 15 strangers looking for adventure in the last frontier. Our guide was Jake Morrison, a local who'd been running wilderness tours for 20 years. The group was typical. Young couples from Seattle, retired folks from California, a few solo travelers like me looking to get away from city life. Normal people seeking normal outdoor experiences. For the first 3 days, everything went perfectly. We hiked mountain trails, saw glaciers, spotted wildlife. Jake knew the terrain like his backyard, keeping us safe while showing us parts of Alaska most tourists never see. At night, we'd camp under stars, clearer than any I'd seen in Chicago. On day 4, Jake led us to what he called the historical site, abandoned mining infrastructure from the Kennecott copper operation. Most folks just see the tourist buildings, he explained, but the real history is in the worker camps and mine shafts scattered through these mountains. That's when Sarah Chen, a geology student from Portland, found the entrance. It was hidden behind 70 years of vegetation, but Sarah's trained eye spotted the artificial cut in the mountainside. "This isn't on any of the historical surveys," she said, checking her tablet. "According to park records, there shouldn't be any mine shafts in this area." Jake frowned, consulting his own maps. "That's weird. I've been guiding through here for decades, never seen that before." But we had flashlights, and half the group wanted to explore. "Just a quick look," Jake promised. "Stay together, don't go deep, out in 30 minutes maximum." The entrance was about 8 feet high and 6 feet wide, carved directly into rock. My tunnel experience made me nervous. Immediately, the walls were too smooth, the angles too precise for 1920s mining equipment, but curiosity won out. "This looks recent," I told Jake as we gathered at the entrance. "The tool marks are wrong for historical mining." "Recent how?" asked Dave Kruger, a retiree from Sacramento. "Like it was dug last month, not 90 years ago." Jake decided we'd do a quick group exploration, stay within sight of the entrance. We entered single file, headlamps cutting through darkness that felt heavier than normal underground spaces. The first 100 feet looked standard enough. Timber supports, adequate clearance. But as we went deeper, I started noticing things that made my professional instincts scream warnings. The air was moving, not just natural convection, active airflow, like a ventilation system running somewhere deeper in the mountain. But there was no equipment visible, no fans or ducts. "Anyone else feel that breeze?" asked Lisa Walsh, a nurse from Anchorage. "Ventilation shaft, probably," Jake said, but his voice carried uncertainty. My headlamp illuminated something ahead that made me stop dead. The tunnel branched into multiple directions, not the random wandering of miners following ore veins, but deliberate engineering. Perfect angles, smooth curves, structural supports that looked grown rather than built. "Jake," I called out, "this isn't a mine." But when I turned around, Jake was gone. So were half the others. "Hello?" Sarah's voice echoed from somewhere ahead. "Did everyone else go deeper?" The remaining 7 of us, me, Sarah, Lisa, Dave, and 3 others, stood in that branching intersection, headlamps cutting through darkness that suddenly felt hostile. "They probably went down the main tunnel," said Pete Martinez, a contractor from Phoenix. "We should catch up." But which tunnel was main? There were 5 passages leading away from our intersection, all identical, all sloping deeper into the mountain. "Jake," Lisa called out, "we're getting separated." The response came from multiple directions at once, voices calling back but muffled, distorted. Impossible to tell which tunnel they were coming from. That's when my radio started working. I'd brought an emergency radio, but it shouldn't have had any signal this deep underground. Now it crackled with clear transmission. "Marcus, down here, found something amazing." The voice sounded like Jake, but wrong somehow. Too clear, no static. "Jake, where are you?" I transmitted back. "Follow the voices, Marcus. Everyone's down here, you need to see this." Sarah grabbed my arm. "That didn't sound right. Jake's accent is different." She was right. Jake had a distinct Alaskan drawl. The radio voice was neutral, generic. "We're getting out of here," I said. "Now." But when we turned back toward the entrance, we found solid rock wall where the tunnel had been. That's impossible. I'd been doing underground work for 15 years. Tunnels don't just seal themselves. But we were staring at natural rock formation, weathered and ancient, like no passage had ever existed there. "What the hell?" Pete ran his hands over the wall. "This was open 5 minutes ago." My radio crackled again. "Don't panic. Come deeper. Everyone's waiting." "Jake, the entrance is gone," I transmitted. "How do we get out?" "Through the lower levels. Follow the main tunnel down. Exit is through the bottom." Professional instinct told me that was wrong. Mines don't exit through bottom levels. That's basic engineering. But Sarah was checking her GPS, face pale in the headlamp glow. "According to this, we're moving," she whispered. "Fast. Like we're traveling through a tunnel network covering hundreds of square miles." I checked my own phone. The GPS showed the same impossible thing. We were somehow racing through underground passages that connected across the entire state of Alaska. "That's not possible," Dave said, looking over Sarah's shoulder. "GPS doesn't work underground." The radio crackled with Jake's voice. "Follow Tunnel 3. Everyone's in the main chamber." "How do we know which is Tunnel 3? Lisa asked. As if responding to her question, one of the passages began glowing. Soft blue-green light emanated from the walls themselves. Not electric lighting, but biological phosphorescence. "Bioluminescent organisms," Sarah said, her scientific training kicking in. "But I've never seen anything like this pattern." The light pulsed in a rhythm that reminded me uncomfortably of breathing. "Marcus," the radio voice called, "bring the others. Time to join the community." Community? Jake had never used that word during our trip. But the glowing tunnel was our only option. We walked single file, headlamps supplementing the eerie biological light. The passage sloped steadily downward, deeper into the mountain than any mine should go. After 20 minutes of walking, Dave stopped abruptly. "Listen," he whispered. Sounds echoed from ahead, voices, but not quite human. Clicking, scratching noises mixed with what might have been conversation. "That's not our group," Lisa said. My radio crackled. "Almost there, Marcus. Everyone's excited to meet you." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. It was enormous, cathedral-sized, carved from solid rock, with the same organic smoothness we'd seen in the passages. But what made my blood freeze was what I saw moving in the darkness. Dozens of figures worked throughout the chamber, but they moved wrong. Joints bending in impossible directions, limbs extending too far, heads turning completely around. In the phosphorescent glow, I could see they wore the remains of outdoor clothing, hiking boots, torn jackets, camping gear. They had been human once. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "Those are people, campers like us." One of the figures approached our tunnel. It walked upright like a human, but its arms hung down to its knees, fingers extended into points. Its face. Christ. Its face was still recognizably human, but the features were stretched, distorted, like someone had grabbed the skin and pulled it in different directions. It wore Jake's jacket. "Hello, Marcus," it said in Jake's voice, but its mouth didn't move properly. The words seemed to come from its chest cavity. "Welcome to the community." Behind it, other transformed figures turned toward us. I recognized Dave's wife Karen from the wedding ring still hanging loose on her stretched finger. Pete's brother Tony, his mariner's cap still perched on his elongated skull. They were our missing group members, changed into something that wasn't human anymore. "What did you do to them?" I demanded. "Improved them," Jake Thing replied. "Adapted them for permanent underground residence. No more need for surface world. No more exposure to weather, predators, starvation." More transformed figures emerged from tunnels around the chamber, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all wearing remnants of outdoor gear from different time periods. Some had clothing that looked decades old. "How long has this been happening?" Sarah asked. "Since humans started exploring these mountains," Jake Thing said. "Lost hikers, missing campers, overdue climbers. We've been building our community for a very long time." Dave backed away from the transformed figures. "What are you?" "We are what lives beneath, what has always lived beneath. We maintain the underground spaces, the deep tunnels, the places humans occasionally find but never truly understand." I thought about the impossible engineering, the perfect air circulation, the organic construction techniques. "You built all this?" "We modify what we need. including new community members. The transformation process, I realized with horror, was already starting. Lisa's fingers looked longer than they had in the tunnel. Sarah's neck seemed to be stretching. The biological luminescence wasn't just lighting, it was changing us, slowly reshaping our bodies for underground existence. "How long do we have?" I asked. "Hours," Jake Thing said. "The process is irreversible once begun. Soon you'll understand the benefits of permanent community membership." I grabbed my radio. "This is Marcus Thompson. Emergency situation in Wrangell, St. Elias. We need immediate rescue." The response came from multiple directions, dozens of transformed figures speaking in unison. No rescue necessary, community expansion proceeding normally. They were using our equipment, our voices, coordinating through some kind of hive consciousness. That's when I realized the truth. Every lost hiker in Alaska's history hadn't gotten lost. They'd been recruited, transformed, added to an underground population that had been growing for decades, maybe centuries. "Run," I whispered to the others. We scattered toward different tunnels, but the transformed figures moved with inhuman speed and coordination. I heard Sarah scream from one passage, Dave shouting from another. I ran deeper into the tunnel system, using my professional knowledge of underground spaces to navigate by air currents and structural engineering. Behind me, I could hear pursuit, not just footsteps, but the scratching sound of fingers elongated into claws. My transformation was accelerating. My arms felt loose in their joints. My vision was changing to adapt to darkness. My breathing was shifting to process the different atmospheric composition deep underground. But I still had enough human consciousness left to find what I was looking for. A ventilation shaft leading upward. Probably an old mining air vent, too narrow for the transformed figures to follow. I squeezed into the shaft, using my tunnel experience to climb the narrow space. Above me, I could see a tiny spot of daylight, maybe 200 feet up. It took 3 hours to reach the surface, emerging through a hidden vent opening miles from our original campsite. By then, the transformation had partially reversed in natural sunlight, but I could feel it wasn't permanent. The changes would resume if I went underground again. I hiked for 2 days before reaching the Park Service station. I told them about the missing campers, the cave system, the underground chambers. They launched a massive search and rescue operation. They found nothing. No tunnels, no chambers, no trace of the 14 missing people. According to their investigation, our group had simply gotten separated during a blizzard that I somehow survived while the others perished from exposure. But I know the truth. They're still down there, part of a growing underground community that's been collecting lost hikers for generations. And sometimes, late at night in my Chicago apartment, I can feel the transformation trying to restart. My fingers get longer, my vision adapts for darkness, and I hear voices calling from the subway tunnels beneath the city. The underground network isn't just in Alaska. It's everywhere, connected by tunnels that predate human civilization. And it's still growing, one lost camper at a time. That's why I'm telling this story. If you ever go camping in remote areas, especially in Alaska, and you find unexplored caves or mine shafts, don't investigate. Don't go underground, because something down there is always looking for new community members. And once the transformation starts, there's no going back.